Chapter 1294. 5 days passed quickly, but it was also slow. This time, Jingyu didn't try to hide at all. She headed straight in one direction, without any obstructions. She didn't need to take any detours or take any other routes. She just flew straight up the city arrogantly. The 5-day flight had caused quite a stir on the main road. The Shiwu Kingdom was in an uproar. The news spread in all directions. Countless people seemed to be in awe and fear. Jingyu and Xiao Chen finally approached Jinling City. Outside Jinling City, at the edge of the Roman forest, dust was flying everywhere. There were flames of war everywhere. The walls of Jinling City were covered in blood and were incomparably dark. On the walls of Jinling City, there were countless soldiers leaning on the walls, dying. They were wearing armor, and their heads and hands were wrapped in blood-stained gauze. However, none of them could rest. They were still standing on the city walls, motionless. General Shangguan Linglan and Shangguan Linglan looked haggard. When they appeared on the city walls, they saw the soldiers opening their eyes and looking at them. Shangguan Linglan's petite body was covered in heavy armor. Her body was covered in fresh blood, but it wasn't clear whether it was the enemy's or her own. Her small face was tense, and her dark eyes were filled with determination. "Are you feeling better?" Shangguan Linglan looked at the soldiers who were barely able to stand, and her heart ached. "Thank you for your concern, General. I'm fine." The soldier looked at Shangguan Linglan and shook his head firmly. After a month of fighting, the originally peaceful Jinling City had been ravaged by the flames of war countless times. Shangguan Linglan had killed a bloody path through the flames of war. The armored woman had fought in front of everyone. The woman who had rushed into the battlefield countless times to save the soldiers had left an indelible impression in everyone's hearts. There were many times when they had forgotten that the person who had saved them from the brink of death was once a young lady from a noble family. Shangguan Linglan asked each soldier. After hearing their resolute answers, Shangguan Linglan would smile and slowly stand up on the city walls. She held the long sword at her waist and looked into the distance. "Jingyu, I'll wait for you to come back." Shangguan Linglan looked at the slowly rising sun. She saw the Tokyo and Nanli's army appear on the plains. She knew that a new day had arrived, and a new battle was about to begin. The sound of the bugle horn rang out. The soldiers who had just laid down stood up the moment they heard the sound of the bugle horn. They gripped their swords and sabers tightly as they stood on top of the city walls. They looked at the densely packed enemy troops approaching from the plains. At this moment, there was no fear in their hearts. "Soldiers, are you prepared to die in battle?" Shangguan Linglan's words echoed in everyone's hearts. What they wanted was not victory, but to fight to the death. Jinling City could not fall. The 9th Emperors and the 9th Imperial Concubine had not returned yet. As long as they could hold on until the 9th Emperors and the 9th Imperial Concubine arrived, it would be enough. No matter what, they had to hold on until then. At this moment, Xiao Chun and Jingyu were their last hope and motivation. "Father!" Shangguan Linglan tilted her head to look at Shangguan Hongwen, who was standing beside her. Unknowingly, she suddenly felt that her indomitable father had already grown white hair. His body was still tall, but why was his back a little hunched? Chapter 1295. Lan Lan, are you scared? Shangguan Hongwen looked at the approaching army and turned to look at Shangguan Linglan. When he saw Shangguan Linglan raise his head, Shangguan Hongwen reached out and patted his head. That loving smile made Shanghai Linglan's eyes fill with tears. "I'm not scared." Shangguan Linglan smiled and said firmly. "Ah," as expected of a member of the Shangguan clan. Shangguan Hongwen laughed loudly and turned to look at the situation below. He took a deep breath and said, "This time, Tokyo and Nanli aren't going to stop. Did you send the letter?" "I sent it." Shangguan Linglan nodded slowly and said, "They should have received the news by now." Sigh. Shangguan Hongwen sighed deeply and said, "Even if they received it, if they rushed back from Cebu, I'm afraid." Shangguan Linglan fell silent when he heard Shangguan Hongwen's words. He tightened his grip on his sword and said firmly, "Father, no matter what, we have to hold on until Jingyu comes back. Let's go." Shangguan Hongwen looked at Shangguan Linglan and turned to leave. Helian Xiao, Yuan Mingyuan, and the others had already rushed to the battlefield. Jinglang, Yi Shui, and the others were also defending the city walls. Everyone was fighting. Within Jinglang, there was only one thought in everyone's mind, and that was that they absolutely couldn't lose. They couldn't give up. Perhaps everyone knew that the possibility of Jingyu and Xiaochen coming back was very small, but no one was willing to think about it. They firmly believed that Jingyu and Xiaochen would come back in time. The flames of war were raging. Countless people were dying. Countless people were fighting. Countless people survived a new round of battles. Before they had time to rejoice, they had to face the next battle. Tokyo and Nanli were ruthless this time. Cebu's participation made Jinling, which was already in a precarious situation, even more dangerous. That morning was the cruelest morning Shangwan Linglan had ever seen. Shangwan Linglan and his men didn't stop fighting for an entire night. They endured wave after wave of battles between Tokyo and Nanli. Shanghai Linglan led his men to fight a bloody battle. Kill! He roared until his throat was hoarse. He couldn't even hear his own voice. Shangwan Linglan gasped for breath and knelt on one knee on the ground. Her vision was already a little blurry. She saw that her elder brother was injured in the distance. She saw Helian Xiao and the others fighting with all their might. She also saw countless enemy soldiers finally climbing up the city walls. Jinling couldn't be saved. In front of Shangwan Linglan, she could see an endless stream of enemies approaching them. The rising sun seemed to carry a blood-red radiance, illuminating the land in red. Shangwan Linglan's chest was filled with unwillingness as he watched his brothers fall one by one. How could they lose? How could they lose? Jingyu hadn't come back yet. The promise they made before they left hadn't been fulfilled. She didn't even have time to say goodbye to Xing'er. How could they lose? Hold on for me, Shangwan Linglan shouted. He waved his sword without caring about anything else. His old injuries had yet to heal, and now there were new injuries. Shangwan Linglan didn't feel anything at all. His dark eyes were bloodshot. Chapter 1296. Father! When Shangwan Linglan saw that Shangwan Hongwen was injured, his heart trembled violently. He lifted his leg, and a halberd pierced through an enemy's body. Lan Lan! Shangwan Hongwen clutched his waist and called out. He was old and weak. Back then, he had fought fiercely for 3 days and 3 nights on the battlefield, but now he was no longer strong. After a night of fighting, he could no longer support himself. Looking at the incoming troops, Shangwan Hongwen's eyes were filled with sorrow. Father, I'm not afraid. Shangwan Linglan held Shangwan Hongwen's hand tightly and said this with incomparable firmness. Just like the words on the city wall, there seemed to be a sense of relief in her firmness. To be able to fight side by side with Father, even if it meant dying on the battlefield. I'm not afraid. In the next life, we will still be father and daughter. How could Shangwan Hongwen not understand the meaning behind those words? Good. Shangwan Hongwen stared at Shangwan Linglan for a long time, then laughed out loud. I, Shangwan Hongwen, have spent my life on the battlefield to have a group of children like you. I can die without regrets. Life and death is decided by battle. Kill. In the distance, Helian Theo saw this scene with his own eyes. At this moment, his heart was trembling violently. Looking at the fighting figures and the troops in the distance, Helian Theo did not know why. But at this moment, knowing that his life was coming to an end, he felt a sense of relief. How regretful. He still had one more request that he had not used up. What happened in the imperial city of Tokyo, the time he spent with Jingyu, all because of the 3 requests of the bet. At the last moment, what Helian Xiao was thinking about was that last request. The request that he had been thinking about and treasuring so much had never been used up. Jingyu? Helian Theo really wanted to ask Jingyu. If they had met earlier than Xiao Chun, would everything have been different? Looking at the endless army, they could clearly see Xiao Jingran, Mu Qinghua, and the others sitting on horses not too far away. They also saw Qin Bai, who was dressed in black, sitting on a horse. At this moment, Helian Xiao's emotions suddenly became very calm, without any ripples. The high priest's methods are brilliant. Na Lan Yue was wearing red clothes. She was sitting on a horse. She looked at Qin Bai with a seductive look. Her eyes were burning. Qin Bai was wearing black clothes, and he was sitting on the horse. He did not show any emotion. This time, Jinling has been completely defeated. Jingyu no longer has any backing. Nalan used and smiled as she looked at Qin Bai. High Priest, how do you plan to deal with Jingyu? This is my business. You don't need to concern yourself with it. Qin Bai's expression was cold and emotionless. He didn't even look at Jingyu. He indifferently turned his head and rode his horse towards Xiao Jingran and Mu Qinghua. The two of you, now that Jinling has been destroyed, there's no need to conserve our troops, right? Qin Bai's expression didn't change at all. When he said these words, it was as if he was saying something insignificant. There's no need to delay. Kill them all. Qin Bai's cold words caused the expressions of the people around him to become strange. They looked at Qin Bai with some fear and then lowered their eyes. Ha! Since the high priest has said so, we naturally won't delay any longer. Mu Qinghua looked into Qin Bai's dark eyes, and her heart trembled. She didn't delay any longer and immediately gave the order. Chapter 1297. He ordered the soldiers who were resting at the back to attack. He wanted to kill everyone in the shortest time possible. Shenghuan Linglan and Helian Xiu were forced to retreat again and again until they reached a point where they could no longer retreat. Jing Lang brought a group of soldiers and horses and approached them. The sun in the sky continued to rise. They were also making their final struggle. Big Brother Jing. Shenghuan Linglan's small face was covered in blood. When she saw Jing Lang approaching, she called out anxiously, "Take everyone and enter the forest." Jing Lang swallowed his saliva and said with a dry throat, "Perhaps this will be our last chance at survival." Shenghuan Linglan heard Jing Lang's words, and her heart trembled. She looked up at Jing Lang and asked, "What about you, Big Brother Jing? You guys go first. I'll bring up the rear." Jing Lang was silent for a few seconds before he said firmly, "No." When Shenghuan Linglan heard Jing Lang's words, she shouted without thinking, "I'll bring up the rear. Big Brother Jing, you take your men and leave first." Shenghuan Linglan said as she pulled Jing Lang and rushed into the crowd. Linglan! When Jing Lang saw Shenghuan Linglan rush out, his expression changed and his eyes were filled with anxiety. Shenghuan Linglan clearly understood how important Jing Lang was to Jingyu. If something happened to Jing Lang, Shanghai Linglan couldn't imagine what kind of blow Jingyu would suffer. This thought only ran through Shenghuan Linglan's mind. She made up her mind. Stop them. Probably because they sensed Shenghuan Linglan and Jing Lang's intentions. The waves of soldiers surrounded Jing Lang. "No one can leave. Stay." A cold shout was heard, and a cold, murderous aura attacked Shenghuan Linglan. Shenghuan Linglan did not think and raised her long sword to block the attack. However, because she was too hasty, her body was hit and she staggered a little. Qin Bai. Shenghuan Linglan steadied herself and looked at the black-robed man standing in front of her with a long sword in his hand. That handsome face, but those bone-chilling cold eyes made Shenghuan Linglan's heart burn with an unknown anger. This liar took advantage of Jingyu's feelings and caused Jingyu to lose her sight. It was all because of this person that Jinling became like this. What? Do you hate me? Qin Bai looked at Shanghai Linglan with a strong sense of mockery. The corners of his mouth curled up as he said, "The more you hate me, the happier I'll be if you die by my hands." Ha ha! Shanghai Linglan laughed out loud. Her petite body was full of arrogance. She looked at Qin Bai and sneered. "You think you're worthy of my hatred? You have a sharp tongue." Qin Bai spat out these words coldly. His face turned cold, and the sword in his hand suddenly moved. If Jingyu had seen this cold man in the past, Qin Bai wouldn't have looked like a person who used a sword. But at this moment, seeing Qin Bai's ruthless moves, she felt a bone-chilling coldness. How could Shanghai Linglan be a match for Qin Bai? In the beginning, she could barely hold on, but towards the end, she was no longer as strong as she wished. How could Jing Lang let Qin Bai fight Shanghai Linglan? She joined the battle, but still couldn't salvage the situation. If I kill you, what will the woman with different pupils rely on? Qin Bai's words were cold and emotionless. Looking at Shangguan Linglan and Qin Bai, who were panting not far away, his eyes were full of mockery. Chapter 1298. The long sword in his hand was pointed at the two of them. His eyes were cold and emotionless. Just as Qin Bai was about to make his move, above the noisy battlefield, there was a quick and clear whistle. What's that? Everyone's eyes were filled with surprise as they looked up one after another. Qin Bai's hand suddenly stopped moving. He looked up and saw 3 figures flying past in the distance. They gradually became clearer in everyone's eyes. 3 humongous fierce eagles appeared in the sky, and a human figure could be seen on each of the fierce eagles. Qin Bai's expression changed when he saw the people on the eagles. His body trembled violently. Then, as if he had thought of something, he turned his head abruptly. When he turned his head, he saw Shangguan Linglan and Jing Lang smiling in relief. So, the other pupil didn't disappear. Qin Bai gritted his teeth as he said this. Shangguan Linglan and Jing Lang's expressions changed momentarily when they heard Qin Bai's words. Jing Yu is back, Shangguan Linglan said happily. Qin Bai tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. When Shangguan Linglan and Jing Lang weren't paying attention, a vicious look appeared in Qin Bai's eyes. He didn't care about the situation in the sky at all. The long sword in his hand stabbed mercilessly at Shangguan Linglan and Jing Lang. Jing Yu, Xiao Chun, and the others rushed to Jinling as fast as they could. When they appeared outside Jinling, they saw the earth-shattering battle. In this battle, Jing Yu clearly saw the soul-stirring scene. When Jing Yu saw Qin Bai's sword moving toward Shangguan Linglan and Jing Lang, a deep fear appeared on Jing Yu's face. Stop! The humongous eagle flapped its wings hard and rushed towards Qin Bai without any hesitation. At this moment, Jing Yu's heart was filled with anxiety. She seemed to recall the scene from before. Other than Chung Sang-du, her father was the same. This lesson had already made Jing Yu on the verge of collapse. Jing Yu would never allow this to happen again. Shangguan Linglan and Jing Lang's eyes widened. Shangguan Linglan's mouth twitched fiercely. Almost no one hesitated and waved the sword in his hand to block Qin Bai's sword. Jing Lang also supported his body to block the sword moving towards him. A hawk cry sounded, and the huge, humongous eagle stretched out its sharp claws towards Qin Bai. Qin Bai's sword was unable to hurt Shangguan Linglan and Jing Lang. When he felt the humongous eagle approaching, Qin Bai's body suddenly dodged, avoiding Jing Yu's attack. Qin Bai. Jing Yu jumped down from the humongous eagle's back without hesitation. After Jing Yu, Xiao Chun and Qinggu also jumped down one after another. Jing Yu, dressed in black, stood in front of Shangguan Linglan and Jing Lang. Her eyes were filled with rage, and her pair of golden-green eyes stared at Qin Bai. Jing Yu's chest was filled with rage. Jing Lang and Shangguan Linglan saw Jing Yu's arrival, and their eyes were filled with joy. Jing Yu, your pupils are still there. Qin Bai stood not far away, and the sword in his hand slightly tightened. He was very puzzled in his heart. How could the blind Jing Yu suddenly recover so quietly? Chapter 1299. However, when he saw Jing Yu's pair of golden-green eyes, the shock in his heart could not be any greater. He had never seen such strange eyes and such a strange color. This made Qin Bai feel a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. I'm not blind. Are you very unhappy? Jing Yu's eyes flashed with a strong sense of mockery. Scenes of the past flowed into Jing Yu's heart. The person she had believed in without a doubt had ruthlessly stabbed her in the back at the last moment. Even after such a long time, Jing Yu could still clearly feel the pain that attacked Jing Yu's nerves. That day, the pain that penetrated into her bone marrow was because he had personally taken away her strange eyes. Qin Bai, have you ever thought that this day would come? Jing Yu's eyes flashed with a strong sense of anger. Amidst the cold, murderous intent, under the fearful gazes of the crowd, the originally fierce battle seemed to have stopped. Jingyu's eyes were full of mockery. The blazing sun in the sky was originally so dazzling, but why was it suddenly not so dazzling? Why did it suddenly seem to be blocked by something? Everyone felt the change in the sky and raised their heads one by one. Shengguan Linglan and Jing Lang looked up in a daze. From the place where the sun rose, a large group of fierce eagles flew over in a frenzy. You? When Qin Bai raised his head, this was the scene that he saw. Suddenly, his eyes flashed with fear. The way he looked at Jing Yu changed a little. Looking at Jing Yu's pair of golden-green eyes, his heart trembled violently. Strange eyes. This was the true power of the strange eyes. Soldiers, kill! Jing Yu saw the change in Qin Bai's eyes and was delighted. With a roar, the wild beasts in the forest rushed out crazily from all directions, as if they had received some kind of order. Beasts, any beasts. Jing Yu, who was standing in the middle of the battlefield, had a pair of golden-green eyes that were flashing with a demonic light. The wild beasts that were coming from all directions had begun their slaughter. What's going on? Mu Qinghua and Xiao Jingran looked at the wild beasts that were swarming towards them, and their faces were instantly filled with fear. Huh! The 9th Imperial Concubine is back. On the other hand, Tokyo and Nanli were shocked, and the soldiers in Jinling City, after a short moment of daze, suddenly burst into laughter. The other-eyed Imperial Concubine is back. Cheers rang out one after another. The soldiers, who had originally been in a killing frenzy, seemed to have been injected with stimulants at this moment. Each and every one of them was full of vigor and vitality. How did they attack you just now? Now kill them back. The two gray wolves, Yin Jian and Yin Feng, charged straight to Jing Yu's side. Jing Yu didn't hesitate to ride on Yin Jian's back. She charged towards Qin Bai fiercely. The corners of her mouth slowly cracked open, revealing her white teeth. She stared at Qin Bai and said viciously, Qin Bai, your life is mine. After seeing this series of changes, Qin Bai's expression changed instantly. He then snorted coldly and looked at Jing Yu as he said, let's see if you have the ability to do so. Xiao Chun led the Lion Riders and Tiger Riders and charged towards Xiao Jingran, Yin Tian, and the others fiercely, causing the originally orderly army to scatter. The ferocious beasts and even the docile rabbits could jump out and bite people. Chapter 1300. There was no doubt that this battle was terrifying. The Cebu soldiers who had just joined didn't even have time to react before they were torn apart by the beasts. Stop them! Stop them! Mu Qinghua shouted in a panic. Didn't they say that the strange pupil disappeared? Didn't they say that Jing Yu was blind? What's going on? What's going on? Mu Qinghua watched as the soldiers died one by one. His terrified screams echoed in the open space. His ears were filled with the roars of the beasts and the panicked screams of the people. How could a frightened army block the attacks of the beasts? Furthermore, these were disciplined beasts that were comparable to a human army. Shut up! Jie Yi's expression was extremely ugly. He was already terrified and was confused by everything in front of him. Mu Qinghua was still shouting in his ears, causing Jie Yi to be even more irritated. You? How dare you speak to me like this? Mu Qinghua was stunned by Jie Yi's angry reprimand. His face turned red and white. He was the dignified crown prince of Nanli. When had he ever been reprimanded like this? He was so angry that his face turned red. Jie Yi turned around and looked at Mu Qinghua as if she was an idiot. She did not even think about it before running toward Qin Bai. She successfully saved Qin Bai and entered the protection circle. She looked at the battlefield that was full of killing. She was very worried. High Priest. Jie called out to Qin Bai anxiously. Yes, Jie Yi was extremely anxious, but Qin Bai was frighteningly calm. His pair of dark eyes stared intently at Jing Yu in the distance. Her petite figure and golden-green eyes were shining with a cold light. It was so glaring. Is she here? Qin Bai was silent for a moment. He tilted his head and asked Lingji. She's still on the way. Lingji shook her head slowly. Her eyes were extremely solemn. After Qin Bai heard Lingji's answer, his expression changed slightly. He stared deeply at Jingyu's figure for a long time. "Retreat," Qinbai said silently. Then, under everyone's gaze, the originally aggressive army quickly retreated in the direction they came from. The beasts chased in the direction of the enemy. Jingyu clenched her long sword tightly. Shengwan Linglan and Xiao Chen also slowly stopped what they were doing. They looked in the direction of the enemy army and narrowed their eyes. "Don't chase," Jingyu said softly when she saw that Hellion Theo was about to give the order to chase. When Jingyu said this, the golden-green eyes flickered slightly. Everyone could clearly see that the beasts that were chasing in the distance also slowly stopped after hearing Jingyu's words. Only howls could be heard from the plains. The bloody battlefield suddenly stopped. This battle came and went quickly. Everyone's eyes were on the battlefield. The beasts that had stopped pacing back and forth at the edge of the battlefield. The exhausted soldiers finally smiled when they saw that the enemy had left. They collapsed on the sand without any scruples. Chapter 1301. Let's do a head count and clean up the battlefield. Jingyu looked at the messy battlefield and exhaled deeply. She raised her hand to rub her aching temples and said, "Don't worry." "Okay." Hellion Theo nodded slowly and looked at Jingyu worriedly. Before he could say anything, he saw Xiao Chun put his arm around Jingyu's waist and walk towards Jinling City. "Are you okay?" Xiao Chen's eyes were full of concern as he stared at Jingyu and asked. "I'm fine. I was too hungry." Jingyu smiled helplessly. Xiao Chen looked at Jingyu's face and nodded. Although she looked a little tired, she didn't look sick. On top of Jinling City, Jingyu and Xiao Chen changed their clothes and rested for a while. The sun in the sky was about to set below the horizon. Jingyu and Xiao Chen stood on top of the city wall, dressed in black. They looked at the messy battlefield below and sighed deeply. None of the wild beasts had left. They stood guard outside the city wall like soldiers guarding the city. The battle was tragic, and it seemed like the battlefield wouldn't be cleaned up today. Under the afterglow of the sun, Jingyu's eyes flickered with a strange light. "Jingyu!" A voice called out from behind her. Jingyu turned around and saw Shengwan Linglan walking towards her. "Aren't you injured? Why don't you have a good rest?" Jingyu looked at Shengwan Linglan's figure and frowned slightly as she spoke with some displeasure. Shengwan Linglan stared at Jingyu. After a moment of silence, he suddenly reached out and hugged Jingyu. Jingyu froze for a moment and hugged Shengwan Linglan back. She smiled faintly and said, "Are you scared out of your wits and are looking for me to comfort you? Go away." The emotions that Shengwan Linglan had been brewing with great difficulty were instantly shattered by Jingyu's words. She was both amused and angry as she raised her hand and slapped Jingyu's shoulder. A faint smile appeared in Jingyu's eyes. "I said I would come back." Jingyu sighed deeply. She stared at Shengwan Linglan and said, "Thank you for waiting for me to come back. You said that when you came back, you would take me to the sky. How could I not wait?" Shengwan Linglan also had a smile on her face as she looked at Jingyu and said with a smile, "Ha, let's go. I'll take you to the sky now." Jingyu laughed heartily. When she turned her head to look at the sky, she saw a huge, fierce eagle flapping its wings and flying towards them. The fierce eagle carried the two figures and flew freely under the light of the setting sun. Xiao Chun and Hellion Theo stood on the city wall and looked at the fierce eagle flying in the sky with gentle smiles on their faces. When the sky turned completely dark, Jingyu and Xiao Chun were already sleeping in Jinling City. All the soldiers had gone to sleep. As for the guard duty, it was left to the beasts. Jingyu also had a good night's rest. What should we do next? In Jinling City, Hellion Theo and the others were sitting. Jingyu and Xiao Chun were sitting at the head of the table. Their eyes were filled with seriousness. "Pursue the victory." Fang Zicheng sat at the head of the table. His eyes were fixed on Jingyu and Xiao Chun as he said, "Although the soldiers are tired, now is the best time to pursue the victory. If we miss it..." Chapter 1302. Yes, I also think that we should take advantage of our victory and chase after them. Hellion Theo nodded at the side and said, "We have already prepared for this huge battle. and it is time for us to start moving. There is no need to think of anything else. That's right. At the side, Yu and Mingyuan also nodded in agreement, saying, although the soldiers are all injured, with the Wanshou army here, they will definitely be protected. We should indeed take advantage of our victory and chase after them. After hearing their words, Jingyu nodded slowly, pursing her lips as she said, however, it is not you all. What? As soon as Jingyu said that, everyone was stunned. All the soldiers are to rest and recuperate in Jinling City. Jingyu stood up slowly and said, for the rest of the battle, we will leave it to the beast army. What? This time, everyone finally understood, and their eyes widened as they stared at Jingyu in disbelief. Don't you understand? Jingyu said with a faint smile in her eyes as she said, those soldiers who are not injured can continue to come. As for those who are heavily injured, they can stay and rest in Jinling. For the rest of the battle, I will personally command the Wanshou army. Attack the enemy camp directly. As soon as Jingyu said that, everyone finally understood. Outside Jinling City, it was probably the first time so many wild beasts had appeared, and they were all lined up in neat rows. In front of them, Jingyu was seated leisurely on Yin Feng, while Xiao Chun was seated on Yin Jian. Helian Theo and Shangguan Linglan were seated on lions, tigers, and other ferocious beasts, respectively. Behind them were the 10,000 beasts, and just like that, they charged towards the enemy camp. In the skies above, there were also countless eagles circling, waiting for Jingyu's orders. Outside the tens of thousands of tents, Jingyu led the Wanshou army and could clearly see where the tents were, and a cold smile appeared in her eyes. She slowly stopped in her tracks, a look of disdain on her face. Jingyu turned her head, exchanging glances with Xiao Chun, Shangguan Linglan, and the others, her lips curling up in a cruel smile. Her gold-green eyes narrowed coldly, and with a wave of her hand, the 10,000 beasts behind her charged forward. Jingyu, Xiao Chun, and the others naturally could not hold themselves back, and they urged their mounts forward as well. Yeah! Loud shouts rang out across the plains as the beasts charged into the tents, tearing and tearing at the tents, tearing and tearing the soldiers to be killed one by one. As for the fierce eagles in the sky, they flapped their powerful wings, extended their sharp claws, and picked up one person after another into the sky, then heavily threw them back down. In almost an instant, the camp became a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Jingyu led her men into the midst of the slaughter, and she saw Mu Qinghua, Xiao Jingran, and the others running away in panic, shouting out for them to block the beasts. However, how could these soldiers possibly block the attacks of the beasts? Jingyu's eyes were cold, and she raised her hand to wipe the blood off her face, her eyes filled with killing intent. A pair of gold-green eyes, in the midst of the 10,000 beasts, seemed to give off an illusion. It was as if the current Jingyu was a ferocious beast. With a pair of gold-green eyes, she was the king of the beasts. Chapter 1303. Jingyu instantly locked onto Jingyu's position. In such a chaotic place, she didn't see Qin Bai's figure, but Jingyu instantly saw Neilan. New and old hatred surged in her heart, causing her to unconsciously tighten her grip on her weapon. Neilan. Jingyu walked towards Neilan step by step. Neilan also saw Jingyu. Her seductive face flashed with a hint of surprise. Then her face darkened. She stared at Jingyu with eyes full of hatred. The killing continued in all directions. Tokyo, Nanli, and Cebu didn't have the strength to resist at all. Their defeat was a foregone conclusion. Too many people had died. The ferocity of these wild beasts was unstoppable. Almost all of the soldiers had died. While Jingyu was entangled with Neilan, she didn't notice that somewhere a pair of cold eyes was quietly watching this scene. Watching the wild beasts tear at the throats of the people. Watching them die one by one. High Priest? A figure stepped forward. It was the Holy Family's third elder, Jie. The person who stood there didn't seem to be anxious at all. He also didn't seem to be moving at all. It was Qin Bai. Almost all of them are dead. Qin Bai's eyes narrowed lazily. His eyes were calm and expressionless. Jie Yi and Ling Ji stood beside Qinbai. Their expressions quickly changed. Qinbai's jet black eyes slowly turned and looked at Jingyu, who was entangled with Nailan. The corners of his mouth hooked up into a faint smile as he said, "Let's do it." "Yes," Jie Yi replied, and turned around to enter a tent. On this battlefield, this was probably the most strange scene. Every place was being attacked, but the wild beasts avoided this place. Why was this? "Manor Lord Ji, I'll have to trouble you from now on." Jie Yi bowed slightly towards the tent behind her and said slowly, No problem, no problem." From the tent, a group of people slowly walked out. Their eyes flashed with a faint light. The 5 or 6 people who walked out all had one thing in common. They were all holding musical instruments in their hands. One of the women was carrying a simple zither on her back. The movement here didn't attract anyone's attention. On the other side, from who knows where, a group of people dressed in black walked out. In this chaotic battlefield, no one seemed to notice this change. "Nailan Yu, today we will settle the score." Jingyu's angry roar resounded throughout the area. Nailan Yu's red clothes were already covered with several wounds. At this moment, she was somewhat embarrassed as she took a step back. Anger flashed in Jingyu's eyes, but for some reason, she strangely didn't release it. The long sword in Jingyu's hand pierced towards Nailan Yu. Seeing Nailan Yu's expression, Jingyu was somewhat puzzled. Just as she was about to stop her attack, she suddenly heard the sound of music in the battlefield. "What's that sound?" Jingyu's advancing body suddenly stopped. Her eyes were filled with confusion as she turned around to look at Yi Shui. On this battlefield, the only person Jingyu could think of who could play a musical instrument was Yi Shui. But when Jingyu turned around, she saw that Yi Shui also had a puzzled expression. Yi Shui was looking up at the sky, as if trying to discern where the music was coming from. Chapter 1304. What's going on? When Jingyu saw that the person playing the music wasn't Yi Shui, her expression changed. Her expression instantly became serious. On the other hand, when Nailan Yu heard the music, she didn't have any doubts. She covered her chest and slowly laughed. "Huh?" Nailan Yu laughed lightly. She looked at Jingyu and said in a mocking tone, "Jingyu, do you really think that you are invincible just because you have different pupils? What do you mean by that?" When Jingyu heard Nailan Yu's words, her expression suddenly changed. Her golden green eyes were filled with a strong killing intent as she looked at Nailan Yu. "Huh? See for yourself." Nailan Yu laughed mockingly. She suddenly raised her hand, and several hidden weapons flew toward Jingyu. Jingyu quickly turned around and dodged. When she looked again, Nailan Yu had already broken through a gap and escaped. Jingyu's expression became angry. Just as she was about to chase after her, the music that she had just heard suddenly came from all directions. The music was so clear that it seemed to have come from the horizon. It instantly attracted everyone's attention. The music went from low to high and was melodious. This music was so familiar. How could Jingyu not recognize it? Yi Shui. The music that Yi Shui was playing to control beasts was this music. Jingyu almost instantly looked in Yi Shui's direction. What she saw was Yi Shui's face filled with shock. Yi Shui's eyes were filled with surprise. She looked around as if she wanted to find where the music was coming from. The melodious music was so familiar. Everyone seemed to have involuntarily stopped what they were doing at this moment. They listened to the music that shouldn't have appeared on the battlefield. In the midst of this music, the sound spread wider and wider. When the beasts that were originally fighting heard this music, they all stopped what they were doing. "Sound attack." These words slowly appeared in Jingyu's mind. Her eyes flashed with a dangerous light. Just as she was about to focus on listening, she suddenly felt her heart beat violently. The music entered Jingyu's ears. When Jingyu heard this music, her heart couldn't help but beat violently. Her body staggered slightly. What was going on? Jingyu's original intention was to use her superhuman hearing to determine where the music was coming from. She didn't expect that when she focused on listening, there would be such a reaction. Immediately, Jingyu's face paled. The music continued to play. Jingyu's golden green eyes flashed with a demonic light. Under this music, the beasts seemed to have received an order and slowly gathered in one direction. Jingyu raised her hand to support her head. Her eyes revealed a ferocious look. The color in her eyes flickered slightly, and the beasts that were retreating stopped in their tracks. In a place where no one could see, Jingyu used her strange pupils to fight a tug-of-war with these people. The music continued to play. At the beginning, it was melodious, but as time went on, it became sharper and sharper. Towards the end, it couldn't be recognized as music anymore. It could only be called sound. Under these sounds, the beasts seemed to have fallen into a dilemma. On one side, they were ordered to retreat. On the other side, they were ordered to advance. All the fighting stopped. Pairs of eyes fell on Jingyu and the beasts. Chapter 1305. But while everyone's attention was on Jingyu and the wild beasts, they didn't notice a few small figures crawling on the ground. The tiny creatures burrowed out of the ground, revealing their tails and sharp, poisonous stingers. Scorpions, centipedes, spiders, and all sorts of other small creatures burrowed out of the ground and swiftly made their way to the nearest person. Ah! A shriek rang out, pulling everyone back to reality. There's a centipede. There's a scorpion on the ground. A cry of alarm drew everyone's attention to the ground. As soon as Xiao Chun sensed Jingyu's abnormality, he immediately rushed in her direction. But just as Xiao Chun was about to move, several people dressed in black suddenly leapt out of the crowd. Their martial arts were extremely strange, and they blocked Xiao Chen's path without a word. Xiao Chen's heart was filled with anxiety and anger, but he didn't have time to fuss over it. After these people came out, more people came out from other places. These people were from the Holy Family and the Poison Sect. They all seemed to be watching the same thing. They only wanted to keep Xiao Chun busy and didn't hurt him at all. Jingyu's expression froze when she heard the shriek. It was as if the music had found an opening. Jingyu's body trembled as she raised her hands to clutch her head. Ah! A pained cry escaped from Jingyu's mouth. It wasn't loud, but it sounded like she was trying to suppress her emotions. Yi Shui was the closest to Jingyu. When she heard Jingyu's cries, she quickly ran over to support Jingyu. Jingyu, what's wrong? What kind of music is this? Jingyu shook her head fiercely, as if trying to chase the strange music out of her head. I don't know. Yi Shui shook her head with a serious expression and said, the first half is about controlling beasts, but I've never heard the second half before. I don't know what it is. Yi Shui looked at Jingyu's pale face and frowned. Jingyu, are you all right? You don't look well. I'm fine. Jingyu raised her hand slightly. When she heard the sound of the flute becoming softer, she felt a little better. She looked at the wild beasts that were completely out of Jingyu's control and said with an ugly expression, we can't let these people take away control of the wild beasts. I'll help you, Yi Shui said as she took out the flute from her waist and began to play it. The moment Yi Shui played the flute, the reverberating sound of the flute suddenly stopped. In a place where Jingyu and the others couldn't see, they seemed to hear someone's happy sigh. It was so clear that they could hear it. Just as Jingyu and Yi Shui worked together to summon the wild beast back, the sound of the unknown flute that had stopped suddenly started again. This time, the sound of the flute came without any warning. It could be said that there was no pause at all as it rushed towards Jingyu. Jingyu's face turned pale, and she almost reflexively raised her hand to cover her ears. In other people's ears, it was just music. However, when it reached Jingyu's ears, it was like a curse that struck Jingyu's heart over and over again. Jingyu, what's wrong? Yi Shui suddenly stopped playing the flute and looked at Jingyu, who was covering her ears and squatting on the ground. Her eyes were full of Jingyu. Chapter 1306. I stopped playing it. Jingyu used all her strength to cover her ears, but the music still penetrated her hands and entered her ears. The music was high and low, and Jingyu felt dizzy for a moment. The moment she felt dizzy, Jingyu actually felt like she was going to die. This feeling, Jingyu's gaze was a little erratic. It was as if she had returned to the time when Jingyu and Yi Shui went to the Roman forest. Jingyu had asked Yi Shui to control the little rabbit and feed it to Jingyu. At that time, Jingyu seemed to have the same reaction. But the reaction was very mild, so mild that Jingyu didn't take it seriously. But today, the feeling was so strong that Jingyu felt like her heart was being squeezed tightly by a hand when she heard the music. She could die from suffocation at any time. Jingyu! Jingyu's eyes became more and more blurred. At this moment, an anxious shout came from afar. Jingyu's blurred eyes regained clarity for a moment. While Jingyu was dizzy, she saw that the beasts in the distance were all subdued, and Xiao Chun, Hellion Theo, and the rest were all subdued by people who appeared out of nowhere. Shangguan Linglan, who had been near Jingyu, seemed to have noticed the abnormality on the battlefield and quickly approached Jingyu. "What happened?" Shangguan Linglan asked while panting. "I don't know." Jingyu shook her head with difficulty and said, "There's something wrong with the music. Retreat. We can't leave." When Shangguan Linglan turned her head to look, she saw the motionless wild beast in the distance, as well as the people who came out of nowhere one after another. Her face became extremely ugly. A clear laughter sounded, and the hurried music gradually stopped. Jingyu's body went limp, and she almost knelt on the ground. Fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead as she looked at Qin by slowly walking out of the crowd. Her lips were slightly pale. "You again?" Jingyu supported her body and stood up. Her golden-green eyes stared deadly at Qin Bai, and the murderous intent in her eyes was obvious. "Who told you that abnormal pupils are invincible?" Qin Bai stood with his hands behind his back. Dressed in black, he quietly looked at Jingyu and said indifferently, "I guess you don't know the other name of abnormal pupils?" When Jingyu heard Qin Bai's words, her expression changed slightly, but she didn't say anything. Abnormal pupils are also known as beast pupils. Qin Bai stared intently at Jingyu's eyes and said indifferently, "Haven't you heard of it? Abnormal pupils are the kings of beasts, the kings of beasts. Haven't you noticed that your eyes are very similar to those of beasts? So what if they are?" Jingyu's lips curled into a cold smile as she asked indifferently, "Nothing." Qin Bai looked at Jingyu's expression and couldn't help but laugh. He said, "The aristocratic family of sound attacks happens to be the kings of beasts, and the kings of beasts are you. Now do you understand why this music is like a curse in your ears?" Sound attacks. When Qin Bai finished his explanation, Jingyu's expression changed completely. Chapter 1307. So that's how it is. Sound attack. Yi Shui's expression became a bit unsightly as she stared intently at Qin Bai. "You are the person from the Sound Attack clan who was left outside, right?" When Qin Bai heard Yi Shui repeat the name, he turned to look at Yi Shui. He looked her up and down and said calmly, "Your clan has been searching for you for a long time." "Qin Bai, what are you trying to do?" Jingyu asked as she stared at Qin Bai. "Take you away." Qin Bai's eyes flickered as he stared at Jingyu quietly. "Jingyu!" Xiao Chun finally broke free from the entanglement and quickly rushed to Jingyu's side. His forehead was covered in sweat as he anxiously looked at Jingyu. When he saw that Jingyu wasn't injured, his gaze landed on Qin Bai. "What a piece of trash. You can't even stop a single person." Xiao Chun appeared next to Jingyu. A fiery red figure also appeared next to Qin Bai. Nailin Yu looked at the person who was knocked down in the distance with displeasure in her eyes as she spoke indifferently. "I'm fine." Jingyu shook her head at Xiao Chun. "Ha!" Qin Bai looked at Xiao Chun, who appeared next to Jingyu, and his eyes turned cold. His lips curled into a cold smile as he said, "Madam Nye, shouldn't you be in charge of your peoples?" It wasn't clear who he was talking to, but after Qin Bai said that, Jingyu's heart suddenly skipped a beat. A figure slowly walked out from the crowd on the left. It was a woman in a loose black robe. She only wore a piece of clothing underneath that even exposed her thighs and navel. Her red lips curled up slightly as her beautiful eyes looked straight at Jingyu. "So anxious." The woman's eyes lingered on Jingyu. Then, as if she was amused, a faint smile appeared on her face. She narrowed her eyes and turned her head to Xiao Chun. "Chun'er, long time no see." The woman looked at Xiao Chun and slowly curled her lips into an extremely faint smile. The mysterious expression in that smile made Jingyu frown slightly. Shock flickered in her eyes as she looked at the woman's appearance. Why did this woman's face actually look so similar to Xiao Chun? Xiao Chun. Jingyu turned her head with a heart full of doubts. However, when she turned her head, she saw Xiao Chun's extremely cold eyes staring at the woman in front of him. The expression in his eyes was as if he wanted to swallow this woman alive. My good little brother, you haven't seen me for so many years. Don't you miss me? The woman covered her mouth and laughed. Jingyu could clearly see a pitch-black centipede crawling up the woman's arm to her neck. What do you want? Xiao Chun was silent for a long time as he looked at the woman and spoke coldly. The coldness in his words was so penetrating. Of course it's because I miss you. I also came to see the legendary imperial concubine with different pupils, my sister-in-law. The woman's eyes landed on Jingyu's face again, and the smile on her lips deepened. Jingyu's brain completely crashed. Brother? Sister-in-law? When did Xiao Chun have an older sister? Chapter 1308. Why hadn't she heard Xiao Chun mention this before? Shut up. Xiao Chun seemed to be very disgusted. He turned his head and glared at the woman with his pitch-black eyes. 20 years ago, I didn't have a sister like you. The moment Xiao Chun finished speaking, the woman's expression changed. The smile on her face slowly disappeared, and her pitch-black eyes were so similar to Xiao Chun's. The two of them looked at each other in silence. Xiao Chun, do you still think that you're the 9 emperors who terrorized the world? The woman's lips curved into a cold smile. Do you still think that I'm the little girl you chased away? Xiao Chun's hand suddenly clenched a little. Jingyu could clearly feel that the atmosphere on the field had suddenly become very solemn. I'd like to see how you, who has nothing left, will resist. The moment the woman finished speaking, Jingyu's ears twitched. When she lowered her head, she saw countless little creatures running out of nowhere. There were centipedes and spiders everywhere. It was pitch black. Jingyu didn't doubt that if she was bitten by these little creatures, she would lose half her life. Jingyu's heart skipped a beat. Her strange pupils flickered, and just as she was about to make a move, music suddenly rang out. It was as if the music had sensed Jingyu's intentions. The music rang out in such a timely manner that Jingyu was caught off guard and fell into a state of shock. Ah! Jingyu suddenly raised her hand to cover her head. When Xiao Chun heard Jingyu's cry, he hurriedly squatted down to support Jingyu. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his ankle. It turned out that a scorpion had crawled up his ankle, and its stinger had pierced into Xiao Chun's flesh. Xiao Chun frowned and kicked the scorpion away. He hurriedly reached out to support Jingyu. However, he didn't expect that the moment he bent down, a wave of dizziness swept over him. A sense of powerlessness assaulted Xiao Chun. As the music grew louder, the dizziness in Jingyu's head intensified. Her body uncontrollably rushed in the direction of Qinbai. However, after taking 3 or 4 steps, she suddenly stopped. Her face was full of pain. Jingyu was resisting. The feeling of being controlled made Jingyu extremely resistant, but it was so difficult to control. She could only allow the gravitational force to pull Jingyu in the direction of Qinbai. No, Jingyu clenched her fists tightly. Her eyes were filled with resistance. The music became clearer and clearer. Under everyone's gaze, the music that came from an unknown place could finally be clearly heard. It came from a few people who walked out playing the flute. Jingyu's body staggered again. She once again moved closer to Qinbai. Jingyu, come back! Shangguan Linglan and Yi Shui were frantically chasing away the poisonous creatures. When they turned their heads, they saw Jingyu moving towards Qinbai. Their eyes immediately filled with anxiety. Shangguan Linglan's voice rang out beside Jingyu's ear. However, it seemed to be drowned out by the music. As a result, Jingyu didn't move. Villa Master Ji, end this quickly. Qinbai looked at Jingyu, who refused to move forward. His face changed. He squinted his eyes coldly and coldly said, "You are not going to be able to move forward." Chapter 1309. As soon as Qin Bai finished speaking, Shangguan Linglan clearly saw a woman slowly walk out from behind Qin Bai. She was carrying a zither on her back. Her face was expressionless as she quietly sat down cross-legged on the empty ground. The zither on her back was propped up on her legs. She lowered her eyes slightly and raised her hand, causing the sound of the zither to flow out. Ah! The moment Jing Yu heard the sound of the zither, her knees gave way and she knelt on the ground. Jing Yu! Shangguan Linglan didn't sense anything wrong with the sound of the zither, but he didn't expect Jing Yu to have such a big reaction. Don't come over. Jing Yu's face was pale as she gritted her teeth. She seemed to be using all her strength to struggle and resist. She covered her ears with her hands in an attempt to block out the sound of the music. Ah! Jing Yu let out an unbearable cry. Shangguan Linglan and Yi Shui were both anxious. On one hand, they wanted to help Jing Yu, but on the other hand, they were entangled by the venomous creatures and couldn't leave. Jing Yu hugged her head tightly. The woman playing the zither was moving faster and faster. The music was like a curse that drilled into her ears. Jing Yu's head was spinning and her hands were trembling slightly. She couldn't help but pick up the long sword on the ground. Jing Yu, come back! Shangguan Linglan hardened his heart as he watched Jing Yu walk further and further away. He couldn't hold back any longer. He ignored the venomous creatures and strode towards Jing Yu. He didn't notice that a scorpion had crawled up his pants. Shangguan Linglan anxiously rushed towards Jing Yu and reached out to pull Jing Yu up from the ground. TSK. Just as Shangguan Linglan approached Jing Yu, who had been squatting on the ground, suddenly stood up at an incredible speed and threw out the long sword in her hand. The sound of the long sword piercing into her body was very clear. The piercing pain caused Shangguan Linglan's body to stiffen. His eyes widened, and the anxious expression on his face hadn't even dissipated. Looking at Jing Yu's expressionless face, Shangguan Linglan slowly lowered his head. He saw with his own eyes that the long sword had pierced her chest. Bright red blood was brewing on Shangguan Linglan's clothes. TSK. The long sword was pulled out without hesitation. Shangguan Linglan staggered and looked up at Jing Yu's expressionless eyes. Her eyes didn't have the slightest bit of warmth when she looked at Shanghai Linglan. Jing Yu. Shangguan Linglan's eyes were filled with horror. He looked at Jing Yu in disbelief as she slowly turned around. Jing Yu didn't seem to hear Shangguan Linglan's call. Like a doll that had lost its vitality, she walked stiffly towards Qin Bai step by step. Qin Bai looked at Jing Yu walking towards him with a faint smile on his face. Good girl. Jing Yu stood in front of Qin Bai. Qin Bai slowly reached out his hand and gently wiped away a drop of blood on Jing Yu's face. Go to sleep. Qin Bai lowered his head and looked at the long sword in Jing Yu's hand. He squinted and looked at the people playing the flutes and the harps. His face turned pale, and he coldly asked, What are you waiting for? Chapter 1310. After Qin Bai said that, the music suddenly became incomparably gentle. Jing Yu's eyes slowly closed, and her body went limp in Qin Bai's arms as she lost her last bit of life. Qin Bai, what did you do to Jing Yu? Shangguan Linglan knelt on the ground on one knee as blood seeped out of his chest. Shanghai Linglan's face was pale, and the light in his eyes was fading bit by bit. He forcefully propped himself up and glared fiercely at Qin Bai. I'm just taking back what belongs to me. Qin Bai carried Jing Yu and glanced indifferently at Shangguan Linglan before his gaze landed on Madame Nie, who was nearby. Go get the reward that belongs to you yourselves. After saying that, Qin Bai's lips curled into a cold smile. He turned around and left with Jing Yu. Shangguan Linglan turned to the side and finally saw the scene. Xiao Chun clutched his chest tightly as he collapsed on the ground. His face and hands were all bruised. Countless centipedes and spiders surrounded Xiao Chun, and the woman in black was squatting next to Xiao Chun. I've already gotten the reward I asked for. The woman called Madame Nie turned around and smiled faintly at Qin Bai happily. I've also gotten my reward, another voice said. Shangguan Linglan saw Yi Shui, who was standing behind Shangwan Linglong a moment ago, was still unconscious and about to leave in the arms of a man who was playing the flute earlier. "You, stop right there." When Shangwan Linglong saw this, he endured the intense pain in his chest and wanted to stand up, but for some reason, his legs turned to jelly and he couldn't stand up. "Little girl, if you have the time to worry about others, you should worry about your own life." Madame Nye gracefully stopped in front of Shangwan Linglong and watched Shangwan Linglong stubbornly refusing to fall. She chuckled in amusement. "How interesting." After saying that, Madame Nye turned to leave. "Stop! Stop!" Shangwan Linglong's vision became more and more blurry. The last thing he saw was the backs of those people leaving. It was so blurry. Shangwan Linglong desperately wanted to rush over, but in the end, he powerlessly closed his heavy eyes. The summer days were scorching hot. Inside an exquisite attic, there was a string of silver bells hanging on the windowsill. As a light breeze blew, the silver bells would ring with a clear and moving sound, echoing in the attic. It was very moving. The sound of footsteps came from the corridor of the attic. A man in a black robe walked toward the attic with steady steps. Exquisite patterns were embroidered on the black robe with delicate silver threads. "High Priest." The man's footsteps stopped in front of the attic. The two maids in white guarding the door respectfully bowed and called out. When the man looked up slightly, he saw Qin Bai's noble face. Qin Bai's expression didn't change. After responding, he asked, "You still want to eat?" "Yes." The maid seemed to be in a difficult position. She lowered her head and said, "The saint still won't eat." "Understood." When Qin Bai heard that answer, he frowned. He nodded to show he understood. He raised his hand, and the two maids respectfully left. Qin Bai silently looked at the door in front of him. He raised his hand and slowly pushed it open. Chapter 13:11. In this exquisitely decorated room, a woman dressed in a light beige dress was lying by the window. Her hair was uncombed, and her clothes were not neat at all. She was lying on the table casually. Her eyes seemed to be fixed on a string of silver bells hanging on the windowsill. "Do you like these bells?" Qin Bai stepped behind the woman and asked in a gentle voice. The woman's body suddenly stiffened when she heard Qin Bai's words. Then, under Qin Bai's gaze, she slowly straightened her body. The woman's black hair swayed, and she turned her face indifferently. On her palm-sized face, a pair of golden-green eyes stared straight at Qin Bai. Her clear eyes looked at Qin Bai, as if she was looking at a complete stranger. "How long do you plan to lock me up?" Jingyu looked at Qin Bai quietly, and a cold smile appeared on her face. She moved her feet as if she was mocking him. Only then could he see that there was a silver chain around Jingyu's ankle. The chain swayed as if it was mocking Qin Bai. Jingyu turned her body sideways and did not want to look at Qin Bai anymore. Qin Bai's gaze fell on Jingyu's ankle. The silver chain around her bare feet rubbed against her ankle and left a red mark on her snow-white skin. "As long as you say you're willing." Qin Bai stared at Jingyu and said, "If you're willing to stay in the Holy Family, I can let you go at any time." "Ha! In your dreams." Jingyu smiled coldly and turned to look at Qin Bai. She said coldly, "If you like to lock me up, then lock me up. In the end, all you will see is a cold corpse." "Jingyu!" Qin Bai's face was filled with anger. He looked at Jingyu's back and grabbed Jingyu's arm. He reached out and grabbed Jingyu's chin. He stared at Jingyu's golden-green eyes with anger. "You are the saintess of the Holy Family. As long as you nod your head, I can make you the Holy Lord." Qin Bai stared at Jingyu with his dark eyes and said, "Xiaoqun has already forgotten about you. Why do you still remember him? What does it have to do with you?" Jingyu frowned in disgust. She didn't care that it would hurt her chin. She flung Qin Bai's hand away and shouted, "Don't touch me. It's disgusting." When Jingyu said this, Qin Bai's face instantly darkened. He looked at Jingyu, who turned her head away and frowned in disgust. He suddenly raised his hand and slammed Jingyu's body onto the table behind her. "Jingyu, don't push your luck." Qin Bai's eyes were brewing a violent storm. As long as I wanted, do you think I don't dare to kill Xiao Chen? Qin Bai's words were filled with killing intent. Huh? Jingyu looked like she had heard the funniest joke in the world. She looked at Qin Bai indifferently and said, if you really dare to kill him, why wait? Qin Bai, you don't dare. You don't dare to kill him. Jingyu stared firmly at Qin Bai. Qin Bai's breathing suddenly stopped. It seemed that Jingyu had guessed his thoughts. He angrily kicked the chair beside him and shouted, look after her. She's missing a hair. I won't let her off easily. Chapter 13:12. Qin Bai flung his sleeves and left. Jingyu's arrogant laughter rang out in the attic. She seemed to have sensed that Qin Bai was far away. Jingyu's expression slowly changed. Jingyu was dressed in a simple white robe that was not tidied up at all. Her black hair was casually draped over her back. Her face was expressionless as she sat by the table. She lowered her head and clenched her fists slightly. She looked at the iron chains that locked her ankles in silence for a long time. She did not know how many months had passed. Jingyu only knew that it was a warm March day. Now, the scorching sun outside was scorching. Even though she was locked in the attic, she could still feel the hot wind blowing in with the smell of summer. It should be now June or July, or even later. Jingyu's lips curled into a cold smile. Since she woke up, she had been in this room. Scenes of the past flashed past Jingyu's mind. The thrilling battlefield and the time when she commanded the beasts seemed to be very far away from her. Her last memory was of that battle. Many people had died. She had clearly won, but she had also lost. Jingyu raised her head and looked at the silver wind chimes floating in the wind. As the wind blew, they emitted a crisp sound. The Holy Family was a place that Jingyu had said she would definitely set foot in. However, she did not expect to set foot here in such a way. Jingyu's eyes were extremely cold. She could still remember that after her last struggle, she could not remember what she had done afterward. When Jingyu regained her clarity, she opened her eyes and arrived at this place. The headquarters of the Holy Family, which was far away from the secular world. Holy Lady, have something to eat? Just as Jingyu was deep in thought, a respectful voice called out to her. Jingyu's body moved slightly as she turned around to look. The woman who was walking towards Jingyu with a plate was dressed in white. She respectfully placed the plate in front of Jingyu. She looked at Jingyu with a pair of pitch-black eyes. There was a hint of worry in her eyes. Qingru, I told you not to call me Holy Lady. Jingyu frowned in disgust when she heard the woman call her Holy Lady. She said coldly, but Holy Lady, Qingru, who had been taking care of Jingyu's daily life for a long time, wanted to speak when she heard Jingyu's words. However, when she saw Jing's cold golden-green eyes, she silently swallowed the words in her mouth. Yes, Qingru replied weakly. Take the food away. I don't want to eat it. Jingyu looked at the food and turned her head away coldly. She closed her eyes without a word, as if she didn't want to deal with the woman. Qingru looked at Jingyu and opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. However, she didn't know what to say. Her lips moved slightly, and she looked at Jingyu helplessly. Miss you, why do you torture yourself like this? The High Priest is so good to you. You are a member of the Holy Family. Why do you want to leave? Qingru's eyes were filled with confusion as she stared at Jingyu. Huh? Jingyu laughed softly. Her eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. Her golden-green eyes stared straight at Qingru. Good to me? Does being nice to me mean that you killed my father, and now you want to kill my brother? Chapter 13:13. Treating me well means using all means to lock me up here? Jingyu clenched her fists tightly as she tried to suppress the murderous intent in her eyes. Chilling words came out of Jingyu's mouth. If he doesn't kill me, sooner or later, I'll kill him with my own hands. Jingyu's words made Qingru's hands tremble violently. Her eyes were filled with panic as she looked at Jingyu's murderous eyes. Her entire body trembled as if she couldn't breathe under the pressure of Jingyu's uncontrollable murderous intent. You can leave. After a long silence, Jingyu said indifferently, How would you know how I feel if you've never loved someone? Qing Ru stood at the door with the plate in her hands. She glanced at the closed door and tightened her grip on the plate. A complicated look flashed in her eyes, but she still turned to leave. The Holy Family was very big, but it also seemed very small. Jingyu stood in front of the attic window. The farthest she could see was the mountains. She couldn't go anywhere. She could only stand in front of the window every day and look into the distance or lower her head to look at the small houses below the attic. Jingyu had thought of escaping, but she had never succeeded. Jingyu's gaze fell on her ankles. The silver chain locked her feet. The chain was very light, but it was very strong. No matter what Jingyu did, she couldn't break it or pry it open. Struggling with all her might would only make the chain tighten. Jingyu couldn't do anything about it. Jingyu slowly withdrew her gaze and walked towards the bed. As she walked, the sound of metal chains clanking was heard. Jingyu was already used to this sound. Lying on the bed, Jingyu's eyes stared intently at the bed frame. Xiao Chun, he must be looking for her like a madman. The Holy Family was hidden in the mountains. The world was so big that no one knew where the Holy Family lived. During the big fight in Jinling, Jingyu did not know why Qin Bai had a backup plan. He could have attacked first, but he had waited until Jingyu led the beast army to kill everyone before showing up. Jingyu finally understood why Qin Bai did this. Qin Bai's intention was very simple. He wanted to use Jingyu to destroy Tokyo and Nanli. The Cebu suffered heavy losses, and the northern pastorals suffered heavy casualties. Because of this battle for the eyes of the four major countries, none of the four countries had an advantage. With their powers weakened, who had the ability to fight against the Holy Family? And who else would have the ability to compete with the Saints for a different pupil? It had to be said that Qin Bai's move was extremely ruthless. Not only did he help himself, but he also managed to acquire the otherworldly eye without sacrificing a single soldier in this battle. Jingyu's eyes flashed with murderous intent. She clenched her fists tightly. For the past few months, Jingyu had been thinking about everything that had happened in Jinling. Jingyu wanted to know what had happened to everyone. Was Xiaoqun okay? Did Big Brother escape safely? Where were Shangwan Linglan and Helian Theo? Jingyu slowly closed her eyes and sighed deeply. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to leave. Just as Jingyu closed her eyes, the tightly shut door was suddenly slammed open by a strong force. Jingyu's body trembled, and she slowly opened her eyes. She heard cries of surprise. High Priestess, are you okay? Chapter 13-14. Scram, scram. Jingyu's brows furrowed slightly as she slowly propped herself up. Her golden-green eyes stared at the person who was staggering towards her. Her black clothes were slightly disheveled. Qin Bai's face was slightly flushed. His eyes were blurry as he held onto a pillar and stared at Jingyu. Jingyu's brows furrowed. Even from so far away, she could still smell the strong scent of alcohol. Don't come over, Jingyu said coldly as she stared at Qin Bai with a cold expression on her face when she saw Qin Bai walking towards her. Qin Bai chuckled when he heard Jingyu's order. His lips curled into a faint smile. Seeing Qin Bai's smile, Jingyu suddenly had a strange feeling. Could it be that Qin Bai was pretending to be drunk? Jingyu, this is this sovereign's territory. Qin Bai continued walking towards Jingyu with a faint smile on his face. And you're my woman. You're telling me not to come over? Crazy? Jingyu furrowed her brows in disgust. She nimbly flipped her body and landed on a chair. Then, she stared at Qin Bai with a cold frown. Don't move. Qin Bai rubbed his forehead as he felt a headache coming on. When he saw Jingyu turning her body, he frowned in displeasure. Crazy. Jingyu rolled her eyes in disdain when she heard Qin Bai's words. She walked towards a chair and sat down. She completely ignored Qin Bai and poured herself a cup of tea. Just as she was about to drink it, someone snatched it away. Jingyu! Qin Bai propped himself up on the table and stared at Jingyu. Jingyu's expression turned ugly when she saw the cup being snatched away. You're the holy lady of my holy family. You're also Qin Bai's fiancée. Qin Bai stared at Jingyu and said, I did all of this to bring you back and sever all ties with the secular world. Why? Why can't you forget him? Qin Bai's eyes were filled with anger when he said this. Jingyu ignored Qin Bai's words. She had already grown tired of hearing these words over the past few months. Jingyu was completely emotionless. She stared at Qin Bai calmly and allowed him to talk to himself. Then, she stood up and turned around to leave. Jingyu! Qin Bai looked at Jingyu's indifferent expression and hated Jingyu to the core. He raised his hand and grabbed Jingyu's arm. Jingyu's body froze and her expression turned cold. Without hesitation, she reached out and forcefully flipped Qin Bai's arm over. Qin Bai, I said, don't touch me. Jingyu pushed Qin Bai away in disgust. Her eyes were filled with disgust as she said, I find it dirty. Qin Bai's body staggered from Jingyu's push. His expression instantly turned ugly because of Jingyu's words. High Priestess. The commotion in the room alerted the guards outside. Immediately, a few people rushed in and supported Qin Bai. Their eyes fell warily on Jingyu. Jingyu looked at these people and then looked at Qin Bai. Then, she turned her head away indifferently. High Priestess, are you all right? The guards looked at Qin Bai and asked, Let's go. Qin Bai looked at Jingyu quietly for a long time. Then, he straightened his body and turned to leave without losing his composure. Chapter 13:15. The sun was still shining. Jingyu stood in front of the window in plain clothes, her expression calm. Day after day passed. Jingyu's situation didn't seem to have changed at all. However, there was a change today. Miss you. Qing Ru's voice sounded beside Jingyu. Jingyu turned to see Qing Ru cheerfully walking into the room. What's the matter? Jingyu blinked in confusion and asked in confusion. The High Priestess is here. Qing Ru panted slightly and stared at Jingyu. Oh! Jingyu responded calmly. Qing Ru waved her hands and wanted to say something else, but Jingyu heard the greeting outside. Jingyu looked up and saw Qin Bai's figure. He was dressed simply in black and didn't seem to have lost his composure at all. He looked at Jingyu with cold and calm eyes, as if nothing had happened last night. Jingyu looked at Qin Bai, and Qin Bai looked at Jingyu. Neither of them spoke. Open it. Qin Bai stared at Jingyu and coldly spat out 2 words. Then, Jingyu saw the 2 people standing beside Qin Bai rush forward. They knelt on the ground and carefully opened the chains around Jingyu's feet. The silver chains were removed from Jingyu's ankles. Jingyu's eyes flashed with surprise. She didn't understand what Qin Bai meant. The chains that Jingyu had been helpless against for months were opened so easily. In 5 days, Xiaoqun will arrive at the Holy Family. Qin Bai seemed to understand Jingyu's confusion and calmly looked at Jingyu. After saying this, Qin Bai could clearly see the surprise in Jingyu's eyes. Didn't you want to see him? I'll give you the chance now. Qin Bai calmly narrowed his eyes and said, It's up to you whether you want to stay or leave. After saying this, Qin Bai didn't care about Jingyu's expression and suddenly turned to leave. Just because of Xiaoqun's news, Jingyu was so excited and happy. Her eyes suddenly lit up and stung Qin Bai's eyes. His back was a little stiff as he turned to leave, and his hands that were hanging by his side were tightly clenched. Sir, Lingji followed behind Qin Bai and frowned slightly when she saw Qin Bai's expression. Withdraw the guards. From today onwards, she can go wherever she wants. When Qin Bai heard Lingji's call, he narrowed his eyes slightly and slowly loosened his tightly clenched hands as he spoke indifferently. Yes. Lingji heard this and bowed. Sir, I don't understand. When they walked down from the attic, Lingji was silent for a moment before she asked, Sir, since you want the Holy Maiden to come back, why did you agree to let the 9 emperors come? Ah! Qin Bai's eyes flashed with a cold light when he heard this and said indifferently, If Jingyu doesn't give up, she won't be willing to stay here willingly. Sir, what do you mean? Lingji was slightly stunned when she heard this and turned to look at Qin Bai with a puzzled expression. Xiaoqun is under the control of the goo poison and has lost his memory. He doesn't remember Jingyu. Qin Bai calmly lowered his eyes and said, As long as Jingyu understands that Xiao Chun is only interested in her for a moment and is using her for his own benefit, she will give up and stay in the Holy Family with peace of mind. So that's why Sir agreed to Tokyo-S request? Lingji's expression changed slightly and her heart trembled. She said with some fear, "Then what about the poisoned sect?" Chapter 13:16. "She's just a pawn," Qinbai said nonchalantly. Then, he turned his head and said, "Secretly send someone to keep an eye on Jingyu." "Yes." Lingji bowed in response. Jingyu was still standing in the same spot even after Qinbai had left. She still hadn't recovered from the shock. Why did Qinbai suddenly let her go? He even told her that Xiaoqun was coming. Was Xiaoqun here to save her? Or did Qinbai want to use her as a trap to lure Xiaoqun into the Holy Family? For a moment, Jingyu's mind was in a mess. "Miss you." Qingru looked at Jingyu in confusion. She called out to Jingyu several times, but she didn't get any response. So, she raised her voice and called out to her. Jingyu came back to her senses. She blinked her eyes in confusion and asked, "What's wrong?" "Eat something. You haven't eaten in a long time." Qingru handed the pastry in her hand to Jingyu when she heard Jingyu's response. Her eyes were filled with worry. She was afraid that Jingyu would refuse again. Okay. Qingru was prepared to pester Jingyu to eat, but she didn't expect Jingyu to agree so readily. Qingru's eyes widened in surprise. "I'll eat." Jingyu took the pastry in Qingru's hand and said, "Qingru, help me find out why Xiaoqun is coming to the Holy Family." Qingru blinked in confusion. Then she said, "Miss you, are you talking about the 9 emperors of the Tokyo?" "Yes." Jingyu nodded. She was a little surprised that Qingru knew that Xiaoqun was the 9th emperors of the Tokyo, but she still nodded. "Miss you, everyone in the Holy Family knows about this." Qingru raised her hand to pour some water for Jingyu as she said, "The high priest sent a decree saying that the 9 emperors of the Tokyo Empire came to visit the Holy Family and asked us to treat them well." "Treat them well?" Jingyu's hand that was holding the dessert paused, and the doubt in her eyes deepened. "Yes," Qingru said quietly. "But I heard that the 9 emperors came to the Holy Family because of the war." "War? What war?" Jingyu's frown deepened. Could it be that something had happened outside that she didn't know about? "I don't know what it is." Qingru shook her head helplessly and said, "I'm just a servant and don't know about these things. If Miss you wants to know, you can ask the high priest. The high priest will tell you." "There's no need." Jingyu turned her head coldly and said, "Put the things down. You can leave." "Yes." Qingru saw that Jingyu was unhappy every time she mentioned the high priest. She could only sigh helplessly and leave the room. She couldn't understand why Jingyu didn't like the high priest. The high priest was such a good person. He still remembered that when the saintess was brought back unconscious, the high priest took care of her overnight. Sometimes he would stand silently at the door for a long time. Sometimes he would stand beside the saintess for a long time in the middle of the night. Sometimes he would stand beside the saintess for a long time. Qingru saw all of this. The high priest treated the saintess so well. She ate and dressed the saintess according to the Holy Lord's standards. Why did the saintess hate the high priest so much? Qingru turned around and looked behind her. She sighed deeply. She really didn't understand, but this was her master's business. As a servant, she couldn't ask. Qingru walked away with the empty plate in her hand. Chapter 13:17. This was probably the first time Jingyu saw what the Holy Family looked like. Jingyu stood at the door of the attic. She was dressed in white, and her hair was tied up in a simple bun. She had a beautiful face and a pair of golden-green eyes that were particularly eye-catching. Jingyu lowered her head and looked at the doorway. For so long, Jingyu's only thought was to step out of this room and escape. But no matter what she did, she couldn't do it. Now, she could finally step out, but she couldn't leave. Xiaoqun was coming. Without confirming anything, Jingyu didn't dare to act rashly. If she brought danger to Xiaoqun because of her, the consequences would be unimaginable. "Miss you?" Qingru called out in confusion when she saw Jingyu stop in her tracks. Let's go. Jingyu slowly raised her eyes and stepped out of the doorway that Jingyu couldn't cross in her heart. She walked down the attic and saw what the high priest's palace looked like. The decor here looked simple, but it was exquisite everywhere. The white walls and the circular arched door added a touch of elegance. Qingru accompanied Jingyu around the high priest's palace and introduced it to her from time to time. After walking for a while, they could see people coming and going. It seemed like she hadn't seen so many people in a long time. Jingyu was dazed for a moment. Holy Maiden, Holy Maiden. On the way, everyone who passed by bowed their heads respectfully when they saw Jingyu's golden-green eyes and called her Holy Maiden respectfully. They only straightened up when they saw Jingyu walk past them. Jingyu's expression gradually turned ugly when she saw this scene. Her eyes were filled with displeasure when she heard them calling her saintess. However, she had heard so much along the way that she was almost numb to it. Jingyu could stop one person from calling her Holy Maiden, but she couldn't stop everyone. So she could only remain silent the entire way. The Holy Family was a clan, but in Jingyu's eyes, it was a city. Miss, you look at this long staircase. It's where the clansmen live. Qingru pointed at a long staircase in the distance. She turned to Jingyu and said, the Holy Maiden, High Priest, Holy Lord, elders, and other nobles live on this staircase. The commoners live under the staircase. They raise fish and flowers to earn their own living, Qingru said proudly. When I was young, I grew up in the village. Later, when the High Priest Palace was selecting maids, I came up here. Okay. Jingyu nodded slowly. She looked down the mountain, but she couldn't see the buildings below. They were all blocked by trees and rocks. Maybe the staircase was really long. So this was what the Holy Family looked like. It was like a small castle. Miss, you look. That's young Master Ming. Qingru turned around and looked at the center of the palace. When Jingyu turned around, she saw a huge statue. It was a woman dressed in ancient clothing. She had one hand over her heart, and the other hand was holding something. She didn't know what it was. Young Master Ming takes pity on everyone. She's the symbol of the Holy Family. Qingru's eyes were filled with respect and admiration. She turned to look at Jingyu happily and said, the High Priest can predict the future. Every 3 years, there will be a divination ceremony. Chapter 13:18. It was very lively then. The High Priest used this method to stabilize the Holy Family and see the fortune of the Holy Family. Qingru smiled as she looked at Jingyu. Divination. Jingyu's eyes were filled with shock. There was really someone in this world who could predict the future. The High Priest is amazing. After Qingru mentioned Qinbai, she began to talk nonstop. She talked about how the High Priest was able to divine the heavens, how earth-shattering, and how he benefited the people. However, the High Priest would rest for a long time after each divination, Qingru said sadly. Qingru said sadly, others don't know, but I saw the High Priest vomit blood once. Fortunately, he was fine. Vomit blood? Jingyu's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. A thought flashed through her mind. It seemed that the Holy Family's divination came with a price. If Qinbai could divine the heavens again, then Jingyu might have a chance. Jingyu's expression changed slightly. Qingru was still talking and didn't notice the change in Jingyu. Let's go back. Jingyu turned and walked back the way they came. Qingru was slightly taken aback when she heard this. She nodded and followed Jingyu. However, they didn't expect to meet someone after walking for a short distance. Greetings, Holy Lord. Qingru saw the woman walking towards them and hurriedly knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully. Jingyu blinked and looked at the woman who was walking slowly in front of her. She was wearing a snow-white robe embroidered with golden threads. Jingyu had never seen a flower embroidered on it before. But in Jingyu's eyes, why did the flower look like a chrysanthemum? Jingyu's gaze landed on the woman's face. She had a delicate face with some heroic spirit. Her makeup was exquisite, and there was a beautiful flower between her eyebrows. Jingyu raised her brows slightly and looked at the woman in front of her. This was the Holy Lord of the Holy Family? You are the holy lady that the high priest brought back? My cousin? While Jingyu was sizing up the woman was also sizing up Jingyu. There was no need to guess Jingyu's identity. Jingyu's golden green eyes could be easily identified. Jingyu heard the woman's words and frowned slightly, but she didn't say anything. I've long heard that the high priestess hid you very well. I thought that she didn't want me to see you. The woman looked at Jingyu up and down in an extremely picky manner. Her gaze made Jingyu very uncomfortable. If you don't have anything else, don't block the way. I'm hungry and want to go back to eat. Jingyu blinked her eyes and said faintly. Then, she walked past the woman and said, "Stop right there." The woman probably didn't expect Jingyu to treat her like this. Her eyes were filled with shock as she suddenly raised her voice and shouted. Jingyu frowned slightly and stopped in her tracks. She turned to look at the woman with a calm expression. Seeing the woman appear in front of her again, Jingyu narrowed her eyes. It seems that I forgot to introduce myself. The woman smiled faintly and looked at Jingyu. This lord is the head of the Holy Family, Unwavering. Chapter 13:19. I know. Jingyu nodded calmly and said, Holy Lord, are you also my cousin? Ha, it seems that you know who I am? Yun Weijun smiled at Jingyu and said, Then do you know that you are only a holy maiden now, and don't know how to greet me when you see me? Sorry, I haven't. Jingyu raised her eyebrows slightly and smiled at Yun Weijun. Her eyes were calm and did not fluctuate at all. You. Yun Weijun's expression changed slightly. Then she looked at Jingyu and said, You're Jingyu, right? Since you know Holy Lord, why ask? Jingyu frowned in annoyance. Yun Weijun looked at Jingyu and her expression changed. Then she turned her head and said, Holy Lord, if you don't have anything else, can you move aside? Jingyu? Yun Weijun was provoked by Jingyu again and again. Even if she had good manners, she became unhappy. Her eyes flashed with anger. She turned her head and looked at Jingyu. Just as she was about to speak, she saw a person walking over in the distance. High Priest? When Yun Weijun saw who this person was, his eyes suddenly showed a look of surprise. Holy Lord! Qinbai was dressed in black. Behind him was Lingji. He walked leisurely toward Jingyu and Yun Weijun. Why is the High Priest in such a good mood today? You actually left the palace to walk around outside? Yun Weijun saw Qinbai arrive and unnaturally raised her hand to smooth her hair. She smiled and looked at Qinbai with a gentle gaze. I haven't seen Holy Lord for a long time. I just went to the palace to look for you and learned that you were here, so I came over. Qinbai's expression was calm. There was no other emotion in his eyes. His lips were slightly pursed. It seemed that there was no smile on his face. The High Priest is here for me? When Yun Weijun heard Qinbai's words, Jingyu could clearly see the look of surprise in Yun Weijun's eyes. That completely undisguised expression made Jingyu lower her eyes slightly. She was indeed at the age of a young girl yearning for love. Let's go. Jingyu watched the two people chatting happily. Jingyu stood here like a third wheel. She immediately turned around and left. Yun Weijun naturally waved to stop Jingyu from leaving. Yun Weijun is naturally happy to have the opportunity to be with Qinbai. Since the Holy Lord is well, I will take my leave first. Qinbai's eyes turned slightly. Looking at the back of Jingyu leaving, he lowered his head slightly and bowed slightly to Jingyu. Without waiting for Yun Weijun to respond, he straightened up and turned around to keep up with Jingyu's pace. Yun Weijun opened her mouth to speak, but when she saw Qinbai turn around and leave without hesitation, the expression on her face suddenly froze. The words she wanted to say were stuck in her mouth, and she couldn't say a word. Qinbai quickened his pace a little, caught up with Jingyu's footsteps, and walked forward side by side with Jingyu. Holy Lord! The person following Yun Weijun, seeing that Yun Weijun was still standing in the same place, called out with some worry. That woman is the Holy Maiden? The woman hidden by the High Priest? Yun Weijun's face darkened a little. It was obvious that what Qinbai said just now about coming to find the Holy Lord was nonsense. It was just an excuse. Chapter 1320. It was true that he was protecting Jingyu because he was afraid of being bullied by Yun Weijun. Since when did the high priestess, who was above the common populace, become so gentle to others? Yun Weijun's face turned ugly little by little, and her eyes were full of coldness. She clenched her fists so tightly that the maids and attendants beside her looked at each other and lowered their heads silently, not daring to say a word. On the other side, Jingyu looked at Qinbai, who was following her, and frowned slightly, but she did not say anything. She turned her head indifferently and walked forward without saying a word. She did not care whether Qinbai was following her or not, and went up to her own attic. Downstairs, Qinbai paused and looked up at Jingyu's figure walking up the attic. His eyes narrowed slightly. "My lord, why don't you go up if you want to?" Lingji looked at Qinbai, who stood still, and looked at Qinbai, who was staring at her. She clenched her fists slightly and asked with a frown, "Let's go." Qinbai heard Lingji's words and did not answer. Instead, he withdrew his gaze and turned to leave. Jingyu stood at the door of the attic. She pushed the door open and entered the room when she heard Qinbai's footsteps. After eating, Jingyu sat down at the table with her head propped up. Her eyes flashed slightly, as if she was thinking about something very important. In the next few days, Jingyu would go out of the attic and walk around the palace of the Holy Family, looking at this and that. It seemed very novel. In fact, Jingyu had planned countless escape routes in just 2 days. On the star platform, Jingyu stood on the highest platform and looked down. She could see the entire palace, the long winding staircase, and the endless mountain peak. Jingyu narrowed her eyes slightly. The world was very big and there were many forests. Jingyu had no idea where they were and which mountain they were on. "Do you like it here?" Just as Jingyu was lost in her thoughts, a faint voice suddenly sounded from behind her. Jingyu's body trembled slightly, and she turned her head to look. Qingru, who had come with Jingyu, and the guards of the star platform had retreated at some point. Standing behind Jingyu was Qinbai, who seemed to have come out of nowhere. His robe seemed to have never changed. Jingyu glanced at Qinbai, then turned her head and did not speak. Qinbai did not expect Jingyu. He slowly walked up to Jingyu. Only 3 people can come up to the star platform. Qinbai stood with his hands behind his back. He stood next to Jingyu and said, "One is the high priest of the Holy Family, one is the saintess, and one is the Holy Master. Aside from these 3, no one else can come up to the star platform. I used to like standing here a lot." Qinbai did not care if Jingyu wanted to hear it or not. He did not care if Jingyu wanted to hear it or not. He continued to say, "When I was young, when I was just a high priest, I often saw my grandfather standing here and looking up at the stars. Sometimes he would sigh, sometimes he would smile. At the time, I didn't know why. Later, I found out." Qinbai's eyes flashed with reminiscence. He smiled faintly and said, "Grandfather was looking at people. He was looking at the future, looking at the past, looking at people." Jingyu's lips curled up into a cold, mocking smile. She stared at Qinbai as she said, "Is this how you guys look at other people's futures? Is that how easy it is for you guys to look into other people's futures?" Chapter 1321. When Qinbai heard Jingyu's question, he paused for a moment and said, "If you want something, you have to pay a price. The High Priestess is no exception." "Ha!" Jingyu chuckled and turned her head away. "If you like it, you can come here often in the future." Qinbai looked at Jingyu's side profile and looked at Jingyu's golden-green eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he said, "Your eyes are the most beautiful eyes I have ever seen. If I could, I would rather be blind." Jingyu snorted coldly and spat out these words without any trace of politeness. She didn't look at Qinbai again and left with a flick of her sleeves. The faint smile on Qinbai's face stiffened. He slowly straightened his body and looked in the direction that Jingyu left. He lowered his hands and turned his head without saying anything. He stood there for a while and walked down the star platform. When Lingji saw Qinbai coming down, she stepped forward and followed behind Qinbai. "Lingji, if I hadn't used her to deceive her, do you think our relationship would be better now?" Qinbai stood on the stairs and turned his head to look up. It seemed that he could still see the figure standing on the platform. "Sir, do you still remember what you said at the beginning?" When Lingji heard Qin Bai's words, the expression on her face changed, and she lowered her head and said, "Don't make the act real," Qin Bai slowly said. The corners of his lips curled up, and there seemed to be a calm smile. However, there was a trace of bitterness in it. He turned his head away and didn't say a word. "Sir, although the Holy Maiden has returned, she is no longer pure. The elders are strongly opposed to you keeping the Holy Maiden, and they have all said that they want to kill the Holy Maiden." Lingji frowned slightly and looked worriedly at Qin Bai. She said, "Sir, you are forcing the Holy Maiden to stay by your side. It won't do you any good if you provoke public anger." Lingji's expression turned solemn as she said, "Moreover, I heard that the Great Elder seems to be looking for a successor to the position of High Priest among the clansmen. I'm still single, and they can't wait to drag me down." When Qin Bai heard Lingji's words, his face turned cold, and he said, "Let's go. I want to see what the Elders Guild is up to." When Jingyu returned to the house, she was surprised to see an uninvited guest in the house. "Yin Wei-jun, what are you doing here?" Jingyu looked at Yin Wei-jun and asked with a frown. "Naturally, I'm here to look for you." When Yin Wei-jun heard Jingyu call her name so directly, she frowned with displeasure. Then she smiled faintly and said, "Sit." Looking at the gesture of raising her hand, she looked like the owner of the house. If Jingyu remembered correctly, this seemed to be her house. However, Yin Wei-jun was the Holy Family leader. It was not an exaggeration to say that the Holy Family belonged to her. Therefore, Jingyu only had a strange expression on her face and did not do anything else. She sat down on a chair and looked sideways at Yin Wei-jun, waiting for her to speak. "Jingyu, I heard that you were already a wife in the secular world." Yin Wei-jun raised her hand and poured a cup of tea for herself. She smiled at Jingyu and asked, "Yes." Jingyu nodded. This seemed to be something that everyone knew, right? "You are the Holy Maiden of the Holy Family, but you are impure. Yet you still hope to marry the High Priest?" When Yin Wei-jun heard Jingyu's response, a trace of anger suddenly appeared on her face. She stared coldly at Jingyu and said, Chapter 13:22. Jingyu looked at Yin Wei-jun with a conflicted expression. "When did I say that I was going to marry Qin Bai? You've already moved into Zhaixing Pavilion. Isn't that obvious?" When Yin Wei-jun said this, a trace of jealousy flashed across her eyes. She hadn't been able to stay a night at the Zhaixing Pavilion, but now Jingyu were staying here every day. "Staying at Zhaixing Pavilion means you're going to marry Qin Bai?" Jingyu shook her head in amusement. "I don't know what you're trying to say. I'm not here because I want to, but because your high priest forced me here. Also, I'm already someone else's wife. I won't remarry. I'll only love one person in my life. If you're worried that I'll steal your man, you don't have to worry. I'm not interested in Qin Bai at all." Jingyu turned away coldly. "You? What kind of man is that?" Yin Wei-jun heard Jingyu say that Qin Bai was her man. Yin Wei-jun's face turned red. Her eyes rolled. She was a bit scared. Jingyu looked at Yin Wei-jun's expression and helplessly raised her hand to her forehead. Her lips twitched as she said, "I've said everything I need to say. It's up to you to believe me or not. If there's nothing else, I'm going to rest." "Wait." Yin Wei-jun hurriedly stood up, her eyes filled with suspicion. She looked at Jingyu and said, "You really don't like the High Priest, do you? Then, why are you staying here?" Waiting for someone, Jingyu looked down and said, "Tokyo, the 9th Emperor's Xiao Chun, is my husband. Why do you think I'm staying here?" "What? The 9th Emperor's is your husband?" Yin Wei-jun's eyes were full of surprise. He said in surprise, "Why didn't the High Priest report this news when he came back? If the 9th Emperor's is your husband..." Yin Wei-jun looked at Jingyu strangely and said, "Then why is the 9th Emperor's not in a hurry at all? Why did he come to visit our Holy Family?" Jingyu clenched her fists slightly. She looked at Yin Wei-jun and asked, "Why did Xiao Chen come to the Holy Family?" Over the past few days, Jingyu had heard a lot of news about this. Xiao Chen's visit had become a hot topic among the people. Everyone was curious about this person from the secular world. The meaning behind his words made Jingyu very puzzled. What else could it be? It's just for the Tokyo's ambition. Unwavering stood up slowly. He looked at Jingyu with a pair of clear eyes and said, I hope what you said today is true. Otherwise, Unwavering didn't say the following words, but Jingyu felt a strong warning from Unwavering's cold eyes. Jingyu frowned slightly and watched Unwavering leave. She was lost in thought. Jingyu was lying on the bed, thinking about Unwavering's words. What Unwavering said just now made Jingyu feel a little strange. But one thing was clear. Xiao Chen's visit this time was above board. According to Unwavering's words, it seemed that Xiao Chen came to the Holy Family to talk about something. Or was it something else? But Jingyu was sure that Xiao Chen didn't come for her. Chapter 13:23. Why Jingyu clenched her fists and clutched the bedsheets beneath her. She pursed her lips and turned her body sideways. An indescribable feeling flashed through her heart. She slowly closed her eyes. Perhaps Xiao Chen was here to hide something? Or did Xiao Chen use some other method? Jingyu was a little nervous and angry that Xiao Chen had rushed in without a care. However, she was also happy that Xiao Chen was finally coming. 5 days passed quickly, but it was also slow. In the morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone on the ground, Jingyu woke up with a start. She had a sleepless night and accidentally fell asleep just before dawn. The reason was that today was the day that Xiao Chen was coming. Qingru. The first thing Jingyu did when she opened her eyes was to ask Qingru about the time. What time is it now? It's almost noon. Qingru smiled faintly and said, I saw that Sanus was sleeping soundly, so I didn't wake you up. Jingyu's expression changed slightly. She lifted the blanket and said anxiously, Hurry and help me dress. Is the Tokyo person here yet? Where is he now? Hurry up. Jingyu's urging voice sounded. Qingru, who had changed, saw Jingyu's anxious appearance, and her eyes paused for a moment before she hurriedly busied herself. She didn't know why Jingyu was suddenly so anxious, but the maids at the side also hurriedly came forward to help. By the time Jingyu walked down the stairs, a long time had passed. Jingyu rushed down the stairs without a care for her image. Qingru hurriedly followed behind her, calling out to Jingyu to be careful. Jingyu's mind was filled with Xiao Chen. She suddenly stopped when she stepped out of the courtyard. Her golden-green eyes stared intently at the man who was walking over from the side. He was dressed in a black robe. His black hair was tied up, revealing his incomparably handsome face. His pitch-black eyes were suffused with an icy light. His thin lips were slightly pursed as he walked with steady steps. The person in front of her was so familiar that Jingyu would never be able to forget him. Xiao Chen. The moment she saw Xiao Chen, Jingyu's heart trembled violently. Her eyes were filled with love. Jingyu almost couldn't help but rush over to hug Xiao Chen tightly. However, what Jingyu saw next made her expression freeze. Xiao Chen walked slowly from the side door. His dark eyes swept over to Jingyu. When he saw Jingyu, his gaze paused for a moment. Jingyu's heart skipped a beat. Then, she saw Xiao Chen's gaze land on her eyes. Without pausing, he turned his head and walked in another direction. Jingyu's breathing suddenly stopped. Thousands of words were stuck in her throat. However, under Xiao Chen's indifferent gaze, her words were stuck in her throat. She couldn't spit out a single word. Even the excitement on her face slowly froze. Why did he look at her like that? Jingyu's mind went blank. All she could think of was the way Xiao Chen had looked at her. Those dark eyes looked at Jingyu as if he was looking at a stranger. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.